Alright guys, Kremp again today. Hope you're doing good and enjoying your day so far with the Esports World Cup just about to get underway. 12 matches will go down across the 4 groups on the first day of the tournament. But the big question for many has been, who are the favourites for the weekend? OpTic just won the World Championship. Surely they're favourites to go back-to-back, but that is not so clear at all. Thieves and FaZe both won 2 events this season, and FaZe, as we know, are the defending champions in Riyadh. Very much into your thoughts and the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Big thanks to PrizePicks as well, supporting the content over this EWC period. If you guys want to get involved in daily fantasy, use the link in the description box below, download the app or the QR code on the screen, use code Breaking Points, claim $50 on the first $5 pick. They've got the KD stuff up and running as well. And of course, tomorrow's first game is OpTic versus 5 Fears. So that's going to be pretty interesting for those guys because the number 1 seed, they get to play the Challengers team first of all. Just wanted to share this as well. I thought was pretty cool to see all the guys sitting down there playing a bit of FIFA. I mean, there's obviously, you know, you've got Lamar in the background here, coach of Cloud9. This is Diamond Con, who we know is stepping in for the Gentlemates team. You've got Looney, coach of the G2 guys, you know, Prolute's there in the background, and they're playing a bit of FIFA and having a good time here. So of course, there's Adam Assault on Team War as well with the changes that they are making. I thought it was pretty cool. Speaking of Team War, actually, Kevin, their top guy, he touched down in Riyadh, and you know, this is what you see, right? You touch down there, you see all the advertising for esports. So I think it's just cool, and I know that the guys, especially those who have been there for the first time this time, guys like Rencor, for example, will feel like, wow, this, you know, esports is kind of crazy that it's got to this point on some level. But also the argument for many, including myself, would be to say, okay, well, yeah, it's amazing that esports has this kind of backing and these facilities and this amount of money on the line, but you know, there's a reason why it's not really working right now in the rest of the world. Is because it's not necessarily super profitable, and maybe it can make sense for, you know, Saudi Arabia in the future, but, you know, we know the game, let's say, and there's a reason why these facilities exist, and it's not necessarily because it makes money, right? And that's what the esports world, certainly in America and the rest of the world, is still trying to figure out for many different esports. For some esports, they've kind of figured it out. Counter-Strike, for example, has a pretty damn good model. Here is Sib as well, hitting the, I mean, look at all the stuff that they've got on offer here. It's actually really cool, all the facilities they have for the players. And I think last year, I don't know if it's the same this year, but last year the players were staying at the Hilton, and attached to the Hilton, they had, which I'm thinking maybe is this like mega player area where there's all sorts of stuff that you can do. Of course, there's practice facilities for the players and everything, and you've got Sib. I mean, there's Kremp in the background, you've got Bant standing right behind them. Of course, he's on the Team Orchid roster, and yeah, all sorts of guys going on. I thought it was pretty fun to see. We also have just a quick update on this. So esports controller player of the decade, if you guys remember, this was talked about quite a while ago now. I think long before, I mean, I'm assuming this is before the World Championship. Maybe it wasn't, I don't know. I think we talked about this though first before champs had actually happened. And of course, there's a few guys up for nomination, Hungrybox, Imperial Hal, but also Formal and Shotzzy. Now in my head, the answer here is just Formal across Call of Duty, across Halo. It just makes sense. But I will say that even with Formal's longevity and the fact that over the last 10 years, Formal has been there playing all of those 10 years at an incredibly high level, Shotzzy, and like, I'm not going to comment on Hungrybox and Imperial Hal because I'm just not so familiar with those esports. But let's just compare Shotzzy and Formal, because I think one of them will probably win. You could argue Shotzzy, right? I mean, Shotzzy has won the 2018 World Championship in Halo, the 2020 World Championship in COD, and now the 2024 and 2025 World Championships in COD as well. Formal in the last 10 years has won only 2 World Championships, right? He won 2017 in COD and then 2022, whatever it was, in Halo. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting because I think when we first talked about this a little while ago now, I was pretty clear that Formal had to be the man. But now having Shotzzy just won champs, all of a sudden it's like, hang on a second here, maybe this is a little bit more interesting of a debate. It's pretty funny, like, if you guys really care about this, you can literally vote every day, once a day. So if you have your preference, then feel free to get involved. You've got another couple of weeks to do exactly that. This I thought was very interesting to look back on the season. So QuackOps put together his team placements on the year, and really what I find interesting about this is just online points versus major points, and the way that the league might want to do things differently going forwards, because it is still very true that for the majority of teams, online matters more than majors. Now, you know, he's coming up with some sort of calculation here to consider how well the teams did this season. And okay, you can look at that in your own right. What I find interesting really is just the number of points that the teams accrued. Falcons, by the way, got 20 points online and 15 points at majors. So, that's that. So you guys can see the rest on the screen. But the point is, right, that if you win an online match, you get 10 CDL points, as we know. If you win a major, you now get 100. It used to be 65. So they did a good thing, right, by increasing the amount of points you get for winning majors and improving the, let's say, balance between majors and online. The problem for me about this scenario still is that for teams that are, let's say, fighting for World Championship qualification, it's still online COD that matters more. And that's because the results, obviously, at the majors are very much skewed at the high level. You win, you get 100 points. You come second, you get like 75. But if you're fighting for top 6, top 4, top 8, all of a sudden the points you're accruing are actually pretty slim pickings compared to what you get in an online scenario. So what you'll tend to find is that for the best teams, they will score more at majors than they will online. But also this year we had loads of online matches, as we know, and also there were minors online, so there were points accrued for that as well. But there were not many teams at all that got more points on LAN than online. And I don't really think it should be that way, right? Because the thing is, the teams that actually win the majors, they take up the lion's share of the points and nobody else gets anything. So for example, Thieves scored 220 points online and FaZe scored 200. And on LAN, they got 320 and 305 respectively. And that feels like a reasonable, relationship to me. And then of course, plus the World Championships, so actually Thieves got 335. And you know what I'm saying, right? But let's say you just exclude the World Championship from this analysis. What you'll see is that the relationship between major points and online points for Thieves and FaZe is about 3-2, which is probably about right. I would like that to be the ratio for all of the teams. But of course it's not because of the way that it's structured, right? So Toronto actually scored fewer points on LAN than online. Miami were, I think, the only other team to score more. They scored 165 at majors and 130 online. Surge, even with all of their finals placings, they still got more points online than they got on LAN by 30. Ravens obviously was totally night and day. Even for Rocker, it was 90 compared to 75. OpTic, they got 130 of their points online. Only 90 of them came on LAN. Boston were far less. Cloud9 were far less. And all the other teams were less as well. Fewer should be the way to say it. So, anyway, that's what I just wanted to point out there, is I think the CDL again needs to think about this, because so many online matches, it just means that, you can pretend that majors are more important, but for the vast majority of teams in terms of qualifying for the World Championship, they're actually just not. So I still think I want to make that point going into the upcoming season. Some interesting stats for the Esports World Cup. Out of the 64 players who competed last year, 46 of them are at this year's event. So actually quite a lot of turnover there. Out of the 16 teams that competed last year, only two returned with exactly the same roster. Boston debuted this team, as we know, last year at the World Cup, and since then they've had some ups and, they've had quite some ups really at the World Championship recently, and quite some downs as well. And as we know, FaZe is the same team, of course, from last year, but everybody else is different. The best placings from last year's EWC that aren't competing here: aBeZy came 4th last time out, Skies was top 8, FeLo was top 8, and they're no longer here, of course. The top 4 was with Surge last year, where aBeZy was. Cellium led last year's EWC with a 1.38, the highest KD for a tournament winner in the CDL era. And these are, just if you're interested, the 46 players returning for their second EWC event. So here are all the relevant names that are back out there in Riyadh again, and pretty impressive as some of these guys, of course, that have been on Challengers teams have managed to qualify on both occasions. But what interested me was some talk about the odds for the tournament, right? So, what the bookies have to say in terms of who's favoured for this weekend. And I think some of these are actually particularly interesting, especially at the top. I mean, look, I'm not really familiar with how these American odds things work. I'm assuming this means the odds of these guys winning are basically 1,000 to 1, which, is pretty aggressive, but at the same time, respectfully, that they're just not going to win. Maybe Omit have some crazy outside chance because they look like the best of the Challenger teams. I don't know, maybe, but even getting out of their group, with Heretics and FaZe, let alone making the run, I don't know. Single elimination tournaments, maybe anything can happen. But you've got Gentlemates, Falcons, Falcons 500 to 1. There's obviously going to be some talk about that, just given where the tournament is being held, and obviously Falcons getting the local buff or whatever. I don't know, the fan buff or whatever. in the venue. But you know, what interests many is like, okay, what happens at the top here, right? Because you've got Boston, Toronto, they're in the same group. They're not really expected to do much. I think Toronto, I mean, you know, maybe there's an outside chance of them, because I honestly thought there was the time this year where I thought Toronto not were going to win an event, but I thought they certainly had a good chance to when they were, you know, Major 3 before Beans failed to arrive and they got Mercules in. They honestly could have won that event, I think, with Beans and maybe even with Mercules, and probably they wouldn't have done. But you know what I'm saying? Like, they looked really good coming into Major 3 and they were confident they could win anyway. After the whole Beans drama, then things fell apart. But it's just interesting that OpTic aren't the favourites. I think that's the key takeaway here, and this is actually from another bookmaker with pretty similar numbers, with OpTic again being the third favourites for the tournament. So Thieves are considered by the bookies to be the favourite for the weekend, which is definitely interesting, right? OpTic just won champs, but yet Thieves, who bombed out top 8, are still considered to be more likely to win the whole thing. Even FaZe, that's apparently is the case more so than OpTic as well, which is, I don't know, I find it kind of surprising that OpTic aren't the favourites for the weekends, but I guess the logic is that OpTic were terrible all season, they finally came good, but still, I mean, their team was so much better than anybody else, but as we know, FaZe won it last year, and it's very, very challenging to go back-to-back in Call of Duty at the best of times, and I do think that Thieves and FaZe are going to be coming heavily for revenge this weekend, maybe especially Thieves, given that, you know, I don't know, like, all the talk about FaZe and how bad it was for them at the World Championship, like, Thieves arguably deserve just as much, if not more, criticism for their performances, and maybe they've escaped some of that. So, anyway, I just thought it was interesting to look at, but what I wanted to look at now was what's going to happen this weekend, because the next couple of days, there are group stage games, and this is what happens, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 matches happen tomorrow, and on the Friday there are 8 more matches. So there are 20 games of COD happening in the next 2 days alone, and they've actually not even got the teams on here that are playing, but thankfully we do. So on BreakingBall.gg you can see all the matches. I just wanted to go through this because it's pretty chaotic. It's 1 PM start time in the UK. That means an 8 AM start time on the East Coast, a 5 AM start time on the West Coast, 7 AM start if you're on Central Time, and yeah, it's going to be an early start. Now, on the Thursday, that's the start time. On the Friday, it starts at 3 PM UK, so it's more friendly, right? And that's 10 AM if you're on the East Coast. So anyway, that's what's going to happen. All of the games happen, the first game is a group. So OpTic will play 5 Fears, that's number 1 versus number 4. G2 play Cloud9, Surge play Orchid, you guys know the rest. After all the first round games have done, so they play them across the same group at the same time, right? So Group A happens at 1 PM, my time, and then Group B happens at the next slots, Group C, Group D. And then at 7 PM in, you know, my time, but pretty late out there at that point in Riyadh, it's going to be, what, a 10 PM match, I think, out there in Riyadh. That's when the winners qualification game is going to happen. So between the winners of those 2 teams, by the end of Thursday, the team that topped the group will have been determined. So all the teams are still in the tournament by Thursday night, but at the end of Thursday, that's when we will know who has topped the group and advanced to the bracket guaranteed. And then they don't have to play on the Friday, because that's just the losers games, and then the qualifying game through the group. And then the weekend begins with the bracket, and then there's 8 matches to get from the 8 teams down to 1. Usually it'd be 7, but this time there's a 3rd place playoff tournament happening just before everything concludes. So that's what's happening in the World Cup over the next couple of days. It's absolute chaos. Very much into your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks to PrizePicks supporting the content. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
What?
What'd you get?
Well, I got platinum, but I'm almost positive that you can't get. Oh wait, we gotta back out. Back out. Back out. Ooh. Okay.
Ooh.
I guess we playing this game too.
Sorry.
That's all good, pal.
that one's on me.
I am in Master Division though, or platinum.
Bro, I want to get a hard point.
Will, what you all jazzed up for? Oh, back out. Back out, Cap. Back out.